Welcome to the SmartCell Insight or SCI demonstration series for Release 3.6. In this demonstration, I'll show you the interface functionality and capabilities of the APs and Controllers Report. I'll cover the information displayed, as well as how the output can be filtered to display specific information, including, but not limited to, data from certain collectors, or certain access points, or only for a specific time period. Okay, let's get started. Here's a SmartCell Insight login page. I'm going to go ahead and log in here with admin as the username and my password. And we'll log in. Of course, this brings us to our overview page, but what we're interested in this demonstration is the APs and Controllers report over here. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And here we are at APs and Controllers. The first thing you'll see here is the overview page. This section has some useful information just at a glance for you, including the total number of APs configured in the system, the APs that have had reboots, and total reboots. Now these numbers are related to the time period that the report runs. When you first log in, it's always going to be for the first 2 days, or the current day and the day before, from midnight to the current time. So you get information about that time period for basically all APs in the system, because again, by default, it's filtered by all APs. So what we have here is we have the total number of APs, the APs that have rebooted. We have APs that are configured for multiple systems, APs with alarms, and the different management platforms out there. So do note this is a demonstration environment, so there is a lot of things here that we're going to see in this demonstration that hopefully you won't see in your own network. You shouldn't see so many APs with alarms. We have APs configured for multiple systems because as we create different demonstration environments, we'll reuse APs and potentially not remove them from other controllers that are out there. And again, useful information from those management platforms. You can see which devices are out there from a controller standpoint, where their zone directors or smart zones, and that'll give you an indication of what capabilities and what information you can expect from a report. And then over to the right of this, you have the APs by offline duration. Again, you see some of these here that have been off for 3 years, 2 years, and 4 months. This is, again, a demonstration environment. You really shouldn't see much in here. Periodically, you'll see some, and it'll just alert you and give you information on APs that have been powered off or removed that either force you to look into a potential problem or maybe do some cleanup on the controllers that are part of this system. So again, I said this is viewing everything in the domain of this SCI system. So we're looking at all known controllers, all known APs. With the power of SCI is that we can start filtering this and generate reports that are specific to the thing we want to do. So up here we can change the output of this to be just a specific group of devices or group of APs and controllers. So as you see here, we sort these things by the system name, so this would be the cluster name, and then the controller, and then any zones that are configured in them. So by clicking on these, I'll only have the APs available that are in that zone. So I can click multiple zones, I can uncheck a zone and select just another zone. You'll see the number of APs that are checked or the number of APs available change as I click on each of these. And if I wanted to do all of the zones that exist within a controller, I can just click the controller itself and it'll highlight all the zones underneath it. Now, if I had a cluster with multiple controllers, by clicking the name of the cluster, it would automatically highlight all of the controllers in it and all of the zones within that as well. And if this were a system that had domains, those domains would also be selected under here, and they would be under the controller, and then all your zones would exist under the domains they belong in. So with this, I can just filter on just these devices, and it'll spin up a new report for me. And now you'll notice the difference where total APs is now those 44 that were part of that domain. We don't have any with reboot, so this pane over here looks a lot better now, and everything looks pretty good for us. Okay, so now I'm going to set this back to all devices out here. So I can just do a reset filters, and that will include everything, even though they're unchecked. This includes everything in the system. So I'll go ahead and do that, and we're back to our other screen with our 2,500 APs and several of them being offline for a very, very long period of time. And again, this report is showing us information from the current date and the day before, April 25th and 26th, 2018. I can change this. There are some preset canned ones. We can do a 7-day range and select that. This will give us for the last week and activity and everything that's gone on in the last week. We can do some custom ranges, so we could pick from the 5th through the 26th and apply all of those. And this will give us information for almost the past whole month. So you'll see some trends over here about the AP counts and how they changed over the course of the month. And over here we also have saved filters. Saved filters allow you to create filters that you can get a quick display of certain APs over certain time periods, things like that, that are really useful for frequently run reports and things like that. So save filters, if you click the gear here, you can create a new filter. You can click the saved filters button and any already saved filters can be run. Now filters are specific to the report that they're created in. So in these other report pages over here, network, WLANs, clients, the save filters are unique to the report that you're looking at. And then the other important note about the reports is that the reports, even if they're saved filters, the filters will be applied to whatever date range and devices that you have listed in here. So the reports are actually, or the filters are actually very useful. They'll apply AP filters, but they won't apply date filters, and they will give you information that maybe is specific to potential certain customer or a certain cluster of controllers or certain APs that you've been monitoring for some reason. So it's very useful for that. Okay, looking further down, we have an AP count trend. This graph right here shows us the number of APs that are configured in the system, the total number of APs configured, and the number of APs that are online. Remember, this is really just giving us trends. So from the beginning date of April 5th to today's date, we can see the online trends. I happen to know this dip right here was an event we had with a power outage throughout everywhere. So, this would be good information that could tell you trends about the number of APs that you have in the system and how many are online. Now, if you check these boxes, they will select or deselect one of these lines in the graph here. So now we're only looking at the total number of APs in the system. This one will look at the online APs only and eliminate the totals. And you see the graph changes with each of these. As you run the mouse over, you actually see the actual numbers being reported for online APs in each plot point on this graph. So we're looking at this within this date range, and we're filtering it on every 1 hour. So basically each one of these is an hour of the day in that date range, and how many APs were online at that particular time point when this data was collected. So we can scroll down now to the AP status trends, and over here we see the statuses, whether online or offline statuses, as well as a few others, unknown statuses, provision status, offline. So we can see the different statuses over here by mousing over the particular graph. Now the colors that we see over here match the colors in the graph. Now these ones are really small, these provisioned ones, but that looks to be an orange. So if we highlight the orange here, we'll see the ones that are in a provision state showing up in our graph right here. And again, you'll notice a little pop-up shows each of the graphs, each of the things we're plotting on this graph, what those counts are at that particular time. Again, this is within the time range that we've specified with an hour-by-hour information. So we can see how many were offline at this particular hour and how many were online. And we could see trends that happen throughout the day or through different times of day to see which ones are online and which ones are offline. So this could be useful information for you. And again, highlighting these plots them on the graph, deselecting them removes them from the display. So you might only be interested in the online and offline statuses, so you can remove the others and just solely look at those and monitor those. Next, we have the top AP models. This tells you which particular access points you have. This could be useful for you because you might have concerns and things related to what kind of features you get from the APs you have. Different versions offer different capabilities, different functionality. So you might see that you might want a different kind of an AP in a certain location. And this information just gives you the top 10 AP models that you have throughout this whole network. So you can see here most of the APs that are known by this SCI system are R500s. Then next comes up our R510s, and then over here in the green are R510s, and then over here in the green is our H500s. Same thing over here with the graph. We can just highlight maybe our top three, which are the H500, R500, and R510s, and just like with the other graphs, hour by hour. And of course, we can change this. We can go day by day and see what they look like each day, and it'll redraw this graph for us. And here we get to see each day what our AP model count was. We'll go ahead and set that back to hours and let that redraw itself. Now the next one we have down here is the top AP software versions. So these are the versions that are installed on the APs. This could be useful for you in some ways as well. Again, what we do with this is, or with the SCI, is just a massive volume of information. There's information about everything in the network to be used however you need to use it. You might be able to use it from a troubleshooting standpoint. You might be able to use it from a administrative standpoint and just monitoring what's in use where, looking for things that need to be upgraded, and getting things to a standardized level possibly. So same thing applies here. We can see most in our network are running the 9.13.2.033 and 9.13.3 and unknown versions over here. So these are probably APs that might be in a state that they're not actually able to report the software version to us. Again, highlight each color for color coding, so the ones you want to look at. Our top three based on the graph over here are the green, the orange, and the light blue. So we'll highlight those and we'll get to plot those on our graph. And as we slide, we get to see how many APs are running these particular software versions. Okay, as we continue down through this, we can see the top 10 AP reboot reasons. So this is actually very helpful. If you're having APs that are rebooting, or just a couple of APs that are constantly rebooting, you might want to look here and see what some of those causes might be and help you to determine what's going on. So we have system faults is the #1 reason that we're having AP reboots. Some others are power cycles. We can see firmware changes cause a reboot, and that's perfectly okay. So some of these are not necessarily problems. They're just letting you know that AP's rebooted and giving you a reason for why. And now again, keep in mind, this is only reboots that occurred in the time period that we're looking at, which is again April 5th through April 26th. So we've got some country code changes, that's a cause for a reboot, IP mode changes, other firmware changes. So there are lots of reasons why we might see reboots in a network. We can look at the trends and see them in the graph of which ones rebooted due to firmware changes, and get some information on that. Now that might be when a new AP comes online, or bringing up several new APs online. You might see that in here as all those APs come online. They're all going to connect to their controller, get their firmware update, and reboot and come back online. So again, very valuable information that you might be able to use here. So the top 10 APs that reboot for a particular reason. So here we have a single AP that's rebooted 1,145 times. That's definitely an indicator of a problem with that particular AP. So it rebooted many times through all these hours. Again, we're moving through each hour of the day until it finally got taken offline. So using this data, we can tell what the cause of the reboots was. We know they started at this point, they ran pretty continuously, and they stopped. Now that stop, we really don't know what the reason these reboots stopped. Maybe it was powered off. Maybe the issue was resolved and somebody fixed whatever problem was going on with it. You can't tell that type of information from the SCI tool, but you can see the trends, and you can see the things that are happening in your network. throughout the entire network because you have visibility into all of it from one single pane of glass. Okay, so here we have our top 10 APs by alarm types. So the APs generate alarms when events occur on the network. We can see what those are. We can see the AP rebooted by the system, NAT failure detected by SmartZone, configuration update failed, DHCP service failure, different messages, alarms related to different APs. So this is a table sorting them by the alarm types. So which is the most common alarm type that SCI is seeing generated by the APs or from the APs. So you can see here a lot of rogue APs detected. And if you look through the graph, you can see that APs or rogue APs are detected pretty much continuously, but there are some very big periods where large, massive spikes and rogue APs detected occur. So, what these times are, you can use this data to try to figure out, what that means and when these occurred and, how it all broke down. But, good potential useful information about the types of alarms that are being generated by APs in your network. So now we see our top AP models again. This is really the same information we saw up above, but this is just in a table format, perhaps a little easier to read. Some may want to see that in a table instead of a graph to see it a little bit better. We get the same counts. We get the number of APs for a particular model, so R500, so there's 1,225. We see the percentage of all the APs that this number makes up. So 46.86% of the APs that are known to this SCI are of the R500 type, and data sorted by the rest of them. You could click on each of these to change the sort order of the list. If you want to go high to low, low to high, if you want to just sort it by the index, which will be high to low again, and you can reverse that as well. And if there are multiple pages, you can use these arrows to see, but these are the top 10. So if we were to go to, say, the top 50, it'll regenerate the report and we'll go through and see what we have here. Now you'll notice there's only 3 pages here, and it's because we only have 25 different AP types in the network. So picking the top 50 really didn't matter for us because we're only limited by the number of APs we actually have. So if we look down here again, this is the top AP software versions. This is, again, the same information we saw in the graph up above, but again in a table format. We can see the AP versions, how many APs that are running that version, and the percentages as well. With each of these, you also have a gear that you can click on and perhaps have some more fields in the table to sort on. This one, we have them all selected. We're showing the percentage of APs with that version, the version number itself, the number of APs with that version, and its index value. Basically, it's a ranking from 1 to 10 in the top 10. This defaults to the top 10, but like with the others, we can select the top 20 or top 50 if we had them. But as we saw earlier, there are only 25 different AP types in this network. So now we have the top APs by offline duration. This is the same as that table up above. And again, keep in mind, this is a demo environment, so it's constantly changing. We're constantly moving access points from one controller to another. We're reusing them. And when we move them from a controller to another controller and we don't remove them from the configuration on the first controller, they show as a down AP. So a lot of these are just things that haven't been cleaned up in the demonstration environment that are used by several people within Ruckus. So the numbers here do not reflect what you should see in your network. You should have APs that are nowhere near like this. Maybe one with a week or something like that to notify you that someone maybe unplugged it or something going on over there. But this gives you the AP's name, and the name here will actually click through to the AP details page. We'll cover the AP details page a little bit later in another demonstration, but this will take you to the AP details page and you can start looking at specific information related to the AP. Considering these have been offline for a very long time, we're not going to be able to get much out of them. But if they were off for a long period of time but were back online, they might still be on this report because the period of time they were offline, and so you might be able to still get back into them and collect some valuable information by clicking through there. So we get the AP's IP address from this table, we get the location, if it's configured in it, what model of AP it is, and which controller it's connected to. Now you can see here we have one that is configured for multiple controllers. Again, this is probably the case of moving from one controller to another controller, and the first controller is showing it as offline. Here's another one that's configured for 2 different controllers. Now we can look at the reboot counts again. Again, very redundant information to what we saw earlier, but it provides a different view, and sometimes seeing that different view might give you a different perspective on it. So we can see that these are the APs themselves that have rebooted. These ones haven't necessarily been named anything yet, but you'll get the name of the AP. You'd be able to click through it to the AP details, and it'll give you more information. But in this table, we get the AP's IP address, its location, the number of times it's rebooted, and the index is sorted by highest to lowest on reboot counts. It'll tell you the date that it was the last rebooted and the reason for the reboot, so whether it was a system fault or power cycle. This one is a reboot due to a country code change. So, some of these reboots are perfectly normal and not a cause for concern, and some of these are something you might want to be concerned about. So here we have the APs configured in multiple systems. So this is, I mentioned earlier, where we have APs that are configured in multiple controllers. So this one here has been configured in 12 different controllers, and when you mouse over it, you can see the 12 controllers it's been configured for. State is unknown, which is a bit of a problem. Someone might want to look into that. And this is the last system that it was a part of. So all of the other ones are ones that it was probably configured as an AP for, but has since been relocated or reallocated to a different controller. So we have several instances of this where we have APs configured in 3 different controllers. And here we have the last ones they're connected to. We get the status, whether they're online or offline. And like I said, in this case, unknown. And there's a lot of information here. So we can go through these and look at the next one. As we click through these, and you see up here, it's the top 100 APs. We can see the top 100 that have been configured in multiple systems. So considering there's only 4 pages here, we probably have less than 40. So yeah, there are 36 different APs that are known to this instance of SCI to be configured in multiple systems. You can also do a drop down here and just go to a specific page, so back to page 1. So here we have the table for AP details for online or offline status. So these are the most recent status changes of APs in the network and what that status was and what they changed to. So we can see the name of the AP, and again, if we click through this, it'll take us to the AP details page over here. But the name of the AP, the IP address of the AP, the location, if it's configured and known, the model of the access point, the controller that the access point is associated with, and what status it changed to and when. So 1 hour ago, we had these APs changed to an offline status. So good for tracking recent status changes and which ones are changing and when, and it'll give us details by clicking through those for each of those APs. This list by default is the last 10. We can select any of these, 10, 20, and we can see the last 20. We got 1 hour and 8 minutes ago now on these. So a lot of these went offline at a particular period of time. And if you look at this, you can see the controller for these APs is the same one. So it might be something associated to the controller and not necessarily the access points themselves. Now we have the AP details for other statuses. These are statuses that are not offline or online. So we've got some AP statuses, all of these different APs over here, again sorted by name with IP addresses. These are all unknown, and if you look at them, it's because they're all last status was a provision status or unknown status. So in the unknown controller. So there's some things going on here that that this would be a place to come to when you have several APs that maybe aren't able to join their smart zone or their controller, and they're stuck in some states, and might make you look into the controller, might make you look at a specific AP model, because again, all of these in an unknown state are the ZF 7982s, and they're all in an unknown state. So you can get some good information from this as well. Next is our resource utilization. So this gives us controller information. So we've gone now from AP information, and you see this report is called APs and Controllers Report. Well, most of the information we've looked at so far has been about the APs, but nothing about an AP is unique to itself because they're all associated controllers. But if we look over here now we're looking at controller information. So on the left we have controller names. We have serial numbers of those controllers, and we can see the CPU utilization, memory utilization, and disk utilization of each of those controllers. So this will give you an indicator of the controller functionality, whether you might need to start looking into expanding to a cluster, whether you're overloading a controller, things like that. So all of these that we're looking at, we have decent disk utilization. One is getting pretty high in the memory utilization, so something might be considered there and some looking into. But this gives you a good quick look at your controllers themselves and the resource utilizations of them. Next, we see license utilization. So again, based on the controller, it'll tell you how many APs are managed, how many of those APs are up, how many are down, and the number of licenses that are configured on the controller. So this one has 20, it's using 13, so there are 7 available to it. You do notice here that the count is related to the number of APs that are up. So this one, 928 are up. There's 1,013 configured in it. 928 are up. There are 85 down. And of their 1,000 licenses, only the 928 that are up are being consumed, so leaving 72 licenses available. So just some good information. Tells you the percentages of usage of licenses. So this is a good indicator of if you're expecting growth and expansion and you're coming up to your limit on licensing, you're probably going to need to go out and purchase more AP licenses. And lastly, we have an assessment of protection from the Key Reinstallation Attack. This provides a status of patched APs within the collection environment. So it can tell you information about assessment maintenance that may need to be performed. So several of these over here are not protected from the Key Reinstallation Attack issue, so those APs should probably look to being updated and being corrected and patched for this issue. So none here. This site has 100% coverage, 1 out of 982, so a little work to do there. These ones are all covered. These 44 are all covered. So this is good information. It gives you some recommendations over here. So you can turn on unpatched client mitigation in the AP to fully secure your network. For unpatched Wi-Fi clients, this one, patch your APs and turn on the unpatched client mitigation to secure your network. All of these give you recommendations on what you should do to address it, but basically bottom line comes to definitely patch your APs and turn on the unpatched client protection. So this is a lot of good information. This is what we can get from the APs and Controllers tab. Now each of these reports can be downloaded. They can be downloaded right here to a CSV or PDF. Now what you download from here will be whatever you're viewing on the screen. So if you set up a new filter, let's just say for the last week, we apply those changes, we look at a certain grouping of APs. So we're only looking at those 44 APs, and you do download here. All you're going to get in that download is the information displayed here on the page. So the information related to these 44 APs and the controllers that manage them. So again, this is great. The CSV is nice. The CSV is data you can use later because it's a comma separated value file that you can reuse and manipulate the data a little bit more. And the PDF is just a easy to read generated report that looks very similar to the screen you're displaying here, with all the same information that you're displaying here. One is easy to read, one is more manipulable, and for you to be able to sort and filter and change on different values. These maintain things for posterity because with all of this data that this SmartCell Insight is collecting, it takes up a lot of storage space. So when you're setting up this controller, and this is covered in another section, you're only storing data for so long. So offloading reports periodically might be a good idea for posterity to save historical data about the state of the network over periods that are beyond the data collection or the data saved capabilities of the SmartCell Insight. Now, one last thing to cover here before we go is the scheduler. So you can set up scheduled reports where you can set this report up of whatever it is we're viewing here, and we can create a new schedule and schedule this to run at periodic intervals. So this again is this report. You give it a name, you give it the format, whether you want a PDF or CSV, and you can repeat this. You can repeat this daily, weekly, monthly, and monthly you're doing from the first of the month to the end of the month. If you do quarterly, these are predefined quarters, and this is from January 1 to March 31st, and then April 1st to June, and so these are predefined quarters, and they're going to generate those reports at the end of the quarter for that period. And yearly reports start on January 1st at midnight of January 1st all the way through to the end of the year, and then that report will be generated. And you can have these sent to email recipients by putting in the email addresses here, separated by commas if you have multiple people that you want to send this to, and you save that and you're ready to go. So you can set up these reports to be scheduled and sent out to individuals, perhaps customers, or just saved in a certain location, again for posterity, just to maintain the data when it's fleshed out of the SmartCell Insight system itself. So that concludes the AP Controllers and Reports demonstration. Hope this information was helpful to you, and hope you come back and review the rest of the demonstrations in this series, where we'll cover these other tabs, including the overview, network, WLANs reports, clients reports, applications reports, airtime utilization, and then some dives, deep dives into the AP details and client details, as well as demonstrations on doing the administration functions within the SmartCell Insight. Thank you for viewing this presentation and this demonstration, and I hope you come back for more. Thanks.